Welcome back to DeadBall TV, everybody. It is either your favorite or your least favorite CONCACAF content creator duo here. Filippo from Tactical Managers back on the channel, and we're just going to talk about the Gold Cup, y'all. We're not even sure what topics we're going to discuss. I guess just check the description. I'll add timestamps after the fact. Filippo, appreciate you coming back on the channel. I texted you the one topic that we have clearly defined, and that is this. Was the 2025 Gold Cup good for CONCACAF?
It's a good question, but it kind of depends on where you're going with it. What do you mean by CONCACAF? The federation, the top three teams? Where are we going with this? For the World Cup?
Let's start with the federation. You're right, because we can slice and dice this a bunch of different ways. But let's go the federation first.
The federation. I think the entire world didn't care, so that didn't change. In terms of money, they sold out the Mexico games, so I'm sure they made the money they wanted. They wanted to sell out Mexico games in the U.S. and make dollars, so they got that. I think if you ask the people in charge, they would say yes, it was a success. I think that's what they care about. Now, if you're going to talk about the national teams, if you're a Canadian fan, I'm going to talk about the big three, right? Mainly. Actually, not even the big three. Let's go the big four, because Panama also was a disappointment. Let's go all big four, all four of them. For Panama, disappointment, right? Canada, major disappointment. This was their opportunity to win a trophy. They didn't even make it to the semifinals. They lost in the quarterfinals to Guatemala. United States, B, C, A minus, B minus, doesn't matter. The U.S. making it to a Gold Cup final, even though some people were trying to portray this as an underdog story. I'm sorry, it's not an underdog story. Who did the U.S. beat that they were not supposed to? Can you name one?
I would say the argument is Costa Rica.
They were not supposed to?
Costa Rica. Yeah.
No,
I think
before the game, you say that?
Yeah, I would have said that before the game.
I
think there's an argument because Costa Rica, yes, they were missing a couple players. The Ugalde suspension was a big one for me. Like, I think the Costa Rican story and the brand kind of needed that win. They kind of needed to beat you guys. Because they're not going to beat this USA team. They're going to beat.
They needed to, but the United States, the players they have, and the one Costa Rica brought, and the ones they were missing, I don't think the U.S. was not expected to win that game. The U.S. was expected to go through. I mean, sure, if Costa Rica knocked out the U.S., I don't think it would be something like Guatemala knocking out the U.S. That would be like an actual upset. But I think the U.S. was more or less expected. And also, the U.S. didn't win that game. It was a tie, and they won on penalty shootouts, right? But then Trinidad and Tobago, Haiti, Saudi Arabia missing half of their team, and then what's the name? Guatemala. The U.S. should have beat all of them, and the United States essentially this summer lost to every single team that was like decent or good. They lost to every team: Switzerland, Turkey, Mexico. Now Mexico, I'll say one thing: they won the Gold Cup, which is what they can do, right? They can't do much more. But if I was an L3 fan, I would be still concerned for the World Cup. I don't think Mexico really stood out the way you would expect them to do so. Sure, they were missing a few guys, but that was more or less the best Mexican side they can put on a field. So Correct. In terms of that, to your question, CONCACAF, probably good, what they wanted, right? They love putting the tournaments in the U.S. I thought we should play the Gold Cup probably in Mexico, maybe in Costa Rica, but they don't want that. They want to make money in the United States. For the CONCACAF teams going to the World Cup, I don't think it was good for any of them in terms of performance.
I would argue that still for Mexico, I do think it was a positive overall in terms of performance. But what about in terms of the rest of the region? So do you think that in this Gold Cup where, Guatemala upset Canada, you have Jamaica getting grouped, you have Honduras beating Panama, who I would have considered the third favorite for this tournament, actually, but beneath Mexico and Canada. I probably would have had the USA as fourth just because of the personnel that was brought. I don't know if you agree with that ranking there.
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
But do you think, given that we had these upsets, we had, Guatemala making the first semifinal since 1996, do you think that's an indicator that the region, CONCACAF, is getting stronger?
No.
Okay, break that down for me.
The final was US-Mexico again. It's been consistent with, since the Gold Cup started, we had one edition where Mexico or the U.S. were not in the final, just one. And over the past, I think, 4 or 5 right now I don't know from the top of my head, I think only one was not U.S. versus Mexico. I think it's much more heavy towards those two than ever. You could argue
Jamaica got
maybe
one and Panama got one. I think since
Panama,
2015.
2019 was US Mexico, 2021 was US Mexico. I think 2023 was Panama, and then this one again. So out of the last four, three were US
Yeah.
Mexico. And that's also with the US not really bringing their best players. Mexico also rested a few in one of these editions as well. So no, I still think it's probably more top heavy than ever with those two. There's a case to be made about Canada, how they should have probably performed better. At least they have the players to perform better. But for example, you talked about Jamaica. Jamaica on paper is a team that should be able to challenge these guys, but they never get their act together. Panama, we were expecting maybe, hey, Panama, let's continue your run going. You've been playing well lately in CONCACAF, and then they lose early. Honduras, I've seen. My point is, if you go back to the Costa Rica golden generation, like 10 to 15 years ago, they were better than any other CONCACAF team right now outside of the US and Mexico. They would probably beat that one, but being that level, right? They would be fighting for the
But
trophy.
they still didn't do a damn thing at the Gold Cup.
No,
Like
they
they
didn't.
never did anything outside of the 2014 World Cup, which I don't want to take away from that.
Well,
But
they did pretty well, like in World Cup qualifying. We'll put it that way too, right?
sure.
But like for example, Honduras, if you go back to the 2000s, they've had a better team. So I don't see the CONCACAF region being better than it was. I still think it's pretty bad. I don't see any sign of improvement based on what we saw in
Really?
this edition. We got the top two in the final once again. Guatemala pulled an upset, and these things happen in tournaments, right? Like we saw in 2002, like South Korea make it actually, let's not even do that. Let's go to like the Euros in 2004. We saw Portugal make it into the final against Greece, which Portugal is another team that probably wasn't expected to make it, even though they hosted it, if I'm not mistaken. It's still not a
Correct.
team that's like they're going to win the Euros, even though they had a young Cristiano Ronaldo. I think Luis Figo was still there at the time. And then Greece, that was probably not even expected to get out of their group. So you're going to say, is the Euros now more competitive because of those two? It can happen in a short tournament. And then they were back to business the edition after. The U.S. and Mexico were still the final. Until I see maybe a Gold Cup where the U.S. and Mexico are not there at all in the final, I won't believe it. And it could
Do-
happen if Canada steps up, if Jamaica steps up, if Costa Rica. It can happen, but I haven't seen it.
I think two things. I think number one, even if we had a situation where Panama versus Canada was the final, I don't think that many people would be looking at CONCACAF and say it's gotten better. You know what they would do, dude, is they would be on Twitter dragging our national teams, saying that they're certified ass and that it's a huge embarrassment they didn't make the final. So I think even if we did see these lower teams, the B tier CONCACAF teams is kind of how I describe them. Even if we did see them achieve success, I still think it would be talked down upon. And
By the
two,
fans, but your question was about our opinion, right? Because, for example, fans are very often irrational. I'm seeing Palmeiras fans like go berserk because Palmeiras lost to Chelsea, a team that has like 10x their budget. And they're like going crazy and pissed off about it. They want to fire the coach because they lost to Chelsea 2-1, right? So
right.
fans can be irrational. But the thing is, for us to claim that CONCACAF is getting better, like you can't keep having a US reserve squad making it to the final.
But
You need to
CONCACAF
have
is more than just the USA and Mexico. And this is a tournament where at the Gold Cup, historically, basically since like the freaking 70s when like Haiti was on top, dude, we don't really see upsets in this tournament. This is not the World Cup. This is not the Euro. You do not see Mexico getting eliminated. You do not see the United States getting eliminated. It's pretty much always been the top three teams, top four teams always make the semifinal. What I liked about this tournament is you had you could argue Guatemala pulled two upsets. They upset Canada, yeah, they had 10 men, and they upset Jamaica in the group stage. You have Honduras, who get absolutely
we can't
smacked
put
by
Jamaica
Canada in
in
the
any
first
upset
game.
category because Jamaica does what Jamaica does. So Jamaica,
Okay, all right. So they had one upset. They had
yeah.
one upset against Canada. I think that's totally fair.
You got to remember one
I,
thing, just so you know, the only camp that Pochettino's U.S. men's national team looked good was when we played Jamaica twice. That was the only
that
one.
should have been the telltale sign that nothing
That
hadn't clicked.
Jamaica was ready to collapse. Like
Correct.
Pochettino, the U.S. only looked good once under Pochettino is when we played Jamaica twice.
I can't even argue against that. I mean, that's completely true. Dude, you want to talk about, I'm recording a video like biggest winners and losers from the Gold Cup, which will be dropping on the channel, so hit subscribe. One of my biggest losers is, of course, Jamaica, but I think overall it is the Caribbean. There's a part of CONCACAF that I don't know how much better it's getting. It's the Caribbean. And there's plenty of stuff to explain that. Haiti, I mean, God bless them. They can't even play games at home. They're basically a failed state at this point in time. I think Suriname are improving, but is that because Suriname's development is improving? No, they're just recruiting more Dutch players. So Dominican Republic, I guess you could say that they are genuinely on the up and up, but again, that's mainly through recruitment. It's not really through
Let me
grassroots.
ask you one thing, actually. I got a question for you. Why do
Okay.
you think there are not many upsets in the Gold Cup? I have two reasons, but I want to hear yours first.
I think one reason is the smaller teams are always having to win away. So if Costa Rica did host 5 Gold Cups in a row, let's say, I bet you they make one final at least. They probably
Probably
make
win one.
2.
Probably win one.
Probably make 2 finals and win 1. Yeah, I think that's fair to say
Mhm.
because they would be able to take down USA, Canada. They have very good records against those
But
2
Costa
teams
Rica is not
all
really
time.
like an upset, right? It's not like an upset. That's what I'm
Correct.
saying.
Yeah, it would be like it would be
Costa
like
Rica
what?
in CONCACAF is like the Netherlands making it to the World Cup final. It's not something that really shocks you. Like they don't win it, but when they make it, you're like, that's a good team, like especially in this region. So an
Yeah.
upset would be like literally Guatemala winning it, El Salvador.
Yeah.
Um, Trying to think of other examples. Honestly, Honduras, I would consider that an upset.
And you
Honduras.
know what, dude? If they hosted, if people had to go to the San Pedro Sula for a final, I mean, Mexico, we're going to lose that game. They kick our ass every single time there.
So I
So
agree with you that one of the reasons is that, but I also think that one of the big reasons why is the gap between the top teams and the lower teams is still quite big, right?
mm,
It's the worst teams are really, 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 really bad. And then there's also teams that are dysfunctional. For the most part, most are dysfunctional. It's not really like Comebol, where usually outside of Bolivia and even Venezuela these days, none of the teams are like punching bags. They're all tough games, right? It's
maybe
always
Chile right now.
yeah. Chile found a way to start sucking lately, but you don't have many punching bags. Like very very well, like Paraguay can knock out Brazil, or it's just like Ecuador is like in the second best team right now in qualifying, and they were down 3 points when it started. So that's what I'm saying. So there are more upsets there than in the Gold Cup, mainly because of that. And again, you can argue that CONMEBOL has two of the greatest soccer nations of all time, and there's still
Easily.
upsets. Yeah, and there's still
Easily.
upsets, right? You saw Chile's golden generation take down Messi's Argentina twice in the final, which is kind of insane. And they were not playing it in Chile, right? It wasn't in Chile. One was even in the United States. I think the gap is still too
Well, the
big.
first one was in Chile, but yeah.
The first one, but the second one was in the U.S. The thing is, I think, and it's good that they did that, right? They won at home, so it's like, oh, you won because it's at home. No, no, no. Let's go to the neutral territory. They win it again. I think what CONCACAF needs is to raise the floor. Once you raise the floor, that'll also probably push Mexico and the U.S. and everyone else higher because they'll have to. So that's my issue with CONCACAF right now, and I don't think is the floor being raised? Maybe. I think also inviting Saudi Arabia doesn't help. You probably want to bring more CONCACAF teams in. Um, and yeah, you are right. Also, if it was hosted in other countries, Mexico, Costa Rica, Honduras, even Panama, the U.S., for example, would most certainly not make it to that many finals. That's for sure. The United States. But they have to raise the floor, and I don't think it's been raised in a significant manner so far.
Okay. I'm gonna wrap up my thoughts like this. I think in terms of who are the two gigantes of CONCACAF, it is the United States and Mexico, and quite frankly, it's gonna take a lot for Canada to somehow reach that status or even replace one of those teams. Like it wouldn't even be, oh, Canada win a Gold Cup, now they're a gigante. No, dude, honestly, you got to win 5, like 5 minimum to even enter the chat. Like you don't have the credentials to get into the club. You got to win 5 Gold Cups, and been 20 years since those boys did something, so they're far away from the conversation. So I agree that like top 2, if it is the Brazil and Argentina of CONCACAF, I agree they're largely untouchable. They're largely still bulletproof, though the US does drop games and Mexico drops games. So, yeah, we can lose games, but in terms of who's winning the trophies, it's still going to be our two teams. I think I'm going to skip the B tier. I'm going to go to the C tier teams now. I'm talking Dominican Republic. I'm talking Suriname. I'm talking Curacao. I think those guys have improved. And I think we saw it where, dude, Canada should have lost to Curacao. In 90 minutes, they should have lost to Curacao. I think we saw a bunch of games this tournament where Dominican Republic, dude, they gave Mexico, I said this on the channel, that was a tougher game than the final. That was a
Yeah.
tougher game than the Gold Cup final.
They have a
So I
really
think
good
the
right
C
winger,
tier,
Peter. What's his name? Peter Gonzalez. Really good
Gonzalez,
player.
beast, man. I wanted to put him in my best 11. I needed the Dominicans to go a little further. But my point is, the C tiers, I think they've improved. And I find it noticeable. I remember like 2023 Gold Cup, 2021 Gold Cup. These guys sucked. They just weren't anything. There was nothing to these teams. The B tier, let me go back to the B tier. I feel like we're seeing a little bit of stagnation. And when I say B tier, I say Canada, Panama, Jamaica, Costa Rica. It's a little bit of like stagnation. Have they gotten closer to the US and Mexico? They show it occasionally. Panama will win, games every once in a while. Costa Rica will win games. But those are the guys that I need to really step up before all of us at the Knights of the Round Table were like, no, CONCACAF is much better. The B tier guys have to take the next step and they have to start being more consistent. But I do think the floor is higher.
Yeah, I think another issue with CONCACAF is like if we even look at the big picture, get out of the international soccer level and go to the club level, it's pretty much MLS and Liga MX competing, right? And then occasionally you get like a
Yeah,
Saprisi or something, but nowadays not even, right? Nowadays not even. It's just MLS and Liga MX. If you go like the CONCACAF Champions Cup, the semifinals is always going to be those two leagues, mainly Liga MX, but those are the two leagues. Even quarterfinals is usually just those two leagues, unless MLS or a Mexican club puts a bunch of subs and then they end up losing to a Costa Rican side, something like that. CONCACAF as a whole has to improve their leagues. It has to be more competitive so that the development will improve and these clubs will get better. Because you talked about these national teams. Suriname is just getting like leftover players from the Netherlands, right?
yes,
And even the Dominican Republic, I'm pretty sure Peter Gonzalez, he was developed in like Spain or
correct.
something like that. So it's not like they're developing their own players. They're just getting like the tier, not even two, like tier 3, tier 4 players that are not really going to play for a national team in Europe, which to be fair, the US also benefits from that, right? We can talk about like Balogun, Dest, right? But the US does have a core base of players developed in the US. Mexico develops pretty much all of their players are
Yes.
from Mexico, and then maybe one or two like MLS, like Julian Araujo, something like that. But 99% are from Mexico. These other teams don't seem to get it. Like Costa Rica does that. They do that. But it all needs to improve. And if it doesn't improve at the club level, it's not going to improve at the international level. And I'm not seeing that. I would say, won't you say that Liga MX and MLS are more dominant than ever in the region?
Yes. And it's getting worse.
That's a problem. Just like in South America, the whole dominance of Brazil is not a good thing. Like the Libertadores used to be tough. Uruguayan teams, Ecuadorian teams, Argentine
Oh,
teams,
yeah.
Brazilian teams. It used to be tough. Nowadays, when it starts, you pretty much go, okay, which Brazilian team is winning this edition? Let's see. Or actually, not even. You'll go as far as saying, what will be the Brazilian final this time? What are the two Brazilian clubs that will make it? That's not a good thing for the region, right? And in CONCACAF, it's even worse. That's the problem.
No, I agree. I think the one thing that screws CONCACAF is the lack of parity. I think parity is a good thing. I think just like what you're describing, when the Gold Cup starts, we
But not
shouldn't
by
be doing our
design.
preview
But not by design. You're saying
like parity by
legitimate.
design, you mean?
No, you're saying parity, but not by design. Because MLS has parity by design, which that I don't think it's a good thing.
And so you're saying merit-based parity, in which case I
Yeah,
agree.
just parity because everyone's just so good and they're making good
Yes,
teams and developing good players that it's just so
correct.
balanced and anything can happen. Now, MLS, what they do is one team could make a better team, but they suppress that team. Like you can't spend more than this, and there's this restriction and that one and this.
Yeah.
Like it's so absurd with MLS that the LA Galaxy were the best team in the league last year, and then they lose like two key players like Ricky Puig and I forgot who else they lost or whatever. They're the last in the league. Why? Because it's just parity by design. So you can lose 2 players and you become crap.
Yeah.
But parity, yes, it's good. I mean, we see it in the Champions League. There's parity among the top teams of the top leagues. It's very close.
Hmm. Yeah. Or, I mean, I watched a lot of Asian football. Like, Japan hasn't won an Asian Cup in 14 years, dude. This is the team that's hands down the best Asian squad. They got all these guys in Europe. They haven't won since 2011. So they go into the tournament as favorites. They are the Mexico of Asia. The difference is Mexico makes the final every freaking time. Japan's get knocked out in the quarters. And I think we could use with a Mexico getting knocked out in the quarters or a USA getting knocked out in the quarters. I think that would be good for the region overall. And I think it would honestly probably have people a little more interested as well, because it's like we like randomness, we like unpredictability as humans. That's why we like watching a movie that we've never seen before, because we don't know what's about to happen. So our adrenaline is up, our dopamine's high, because we're like, maybe the main character's gonna die. Oh my god, the Red Wedding, Game of Thrones.
I
But with
mean,
CONCACAF, it's like we just skip to the final, and it's like, all right, who's Mexico gonna play this time? And that
it,
shouldn't be the case.
it's also like if you start to do it in other countries, you allow the federation and the soccer community of that country to make money off the tournament
Yeah.
and help development and even make it more popular. Like I'm looking here real quick, the African Cup of Nations, trying to see the winners of the edition. It's almost like always a different team. I mean, Egypt had a little bit of a run in the mid 2000s, but it's almost always a different final, different teams. If it
It's
repeats a final,
chaos.
the team wins one. Like Senegal lost to Algeria, then beat Egypt on the other one. Ivory Coast and Nigeria. That's exciting, and that shows
Mhm.
parity in the region. Sure, African nations do disappoint very often in the World Cup, but I mean they got a team in the semifinals last time, and they're always like getting someone in the quarterfinals. They've had teams that they look far more competitive than CONCACAF. But that's what I was saying. It's like, has CONCACAF improved? No, because I keep seeing U.S. and Mexico dominance, which is not even the U.S. bringing a mediocre roster. The United States should have been destroyed in this Gold Cup with the roster they brought. If
Mhm.
um if some team in Africa right there brings like a B or C team, they're probably getting grouped. And then the US bring
100%
yeah,
certainty,
and then
dude.
the US brings this mediocre roster. They start a center forward that I can't believe that guy's a professional player. And here they are. They made it to the final. It doesn't matter if Guatemala upset Canada or not, whatever happened. The US made it to the final.
Dude,
Like
that's why I said huge L for Costa Rica. I'm sorry. You got to win that game. You got to take down this group of USA players. You have to. Otherwise, you're just the same as you've always been.
but here's the
I,
thing. The only team we saw in the Gold Cup that when they played, even though it was a tough game, they were clearly superior. It was Mexico against the US. Like the US Mexico was clearly better. It was very noticeable. And I think if the US didn't score the first goal, it probably would have been 2-3-0 Mexico. Because the US scored the first goal and then
yeah,
just
probably.
defended. But if Mexico scored first and the US like, okay, we got to open up and attack, it would have been 3, maybe 4-0. Could have gotten very ugly. Um, so again, if the region was good enough, this US team would have been taken down early.
In that sense, I agree. And I'll reiterate, I do think that's a failure of the B tier teams. I think the B tier teams should be seeing a weakened Mexico side or a weakened USA side and be like, all right, we're going to kill these guys. And instead, well, Mexico, we brought the A team. But instead, it didn't happen. I mean, Guatemala, credit to them, they pushed the U.S. It was actually a really good game. If they didn't F up in the first 10 minutes, maybe they would have beat you guys. But at the end of the day, they didn't. And that's where I'm like, this is the next evolution. I think now we're seeing, I do think the floor is up. But the next evolution is knocking out Mexico, knocking out the United States, Canada freaking doing something.